Transat Airlines Flight 236 was en route from Toronto to Lisbon. It was early night, and the plane was cruising in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at an altitude of 39,000 feet. Pilots face such situations every day, and there was nothing abnormal about it. However, there was one thing on board that was about to change everything within moments. Let us mention here that even at 39,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, no land was visible anywhere nearby. Suddenly, the captain realized that the plane was running out of fuel. This was a terrifying situation for both pilots because running out of fuel over the Atlantic Ocean meant only one thing: death. At Toronto Pearson Airport, and Transat Airlines Airbus A330 was prepared to fly to Lisbon. It was going to be a non-stop 7-hour flight, which is why 48 metric tons of fuel had been loaded into it. After preparations were completed, the boarding process began. At this time, it was 9 p.m. local time. There were 293 passengers and 13 crew members on Flight 236, including 2 pilots. The flight captain, Robert, was 48 years old and had 16,000 hours of flight experience. The first officer was 28 years old and had 5,000 hours of experience, including 400 hours on the Airbus A330. Speaking of the aircraft, it was a state-of-the-art Airbus A330 model at that time, only 2 years old. The point is, there was no lack of experience among the pilots, nor was there any defect in any part of the aircraft. After completing all the flight checks, the pilots taxied Flight 236 to the runway and, with permission from ATC, took off. After takeoff, the pilot directed the aircraft toward Lisbon over the Atlantic Ocean. Within minutes, the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. On such long flights, pilots don't have much active work because most of the operations are handled by the autopilot system. The pilots only monitor the systems and keep the control tower updated with their location and status. Flight 236 had now been airborne for 4 hours. So far, everything was proceeding normally, and most of the passengers were asleep since it was nighttime. The aircraft had reached the center of the Atlantic Ocean, and this was the moment when something happened on board. According to Canadian time, at 1 a.m., the pilot noticed an abnormal reading from engine number 2, the right engine of the plane. The oil pressure in the engine was showing high, the oil quantity was low, and the oil temperature was also indicating low. The pilots had never encountered such errors in their careers. They were seeing this for the first time. They opened the foreign flight manual and tried to find the cause of this strange error. Normally, when the plane is in operation, the oil temperature increases with time, but here it was indicating a low temperature, which was not normal in any way. They could not find any information about this error in the flight manual. The pilots contacted the maintenance unit in Canada and in transit and informed them about the cause of this error. Unfortunately, the maintenance unit also did not know the cause of this error. They told the pilot to keep monitoring this error and that they would contact them again after some time. It was showing faulty oil readings in the right engine of the plane, but there was no problem in the flight. The pilots relaxed, thinking that maybe some faulty sensor was giving wrong oil readings, but after half an hour, another advisory message was displayed in front of the captain. This message was not related to oil, but to fuel. It was related to the fact that commercial airlines distribute fuel equally in their wings, and it was noticed that both the wings of Flight 236 did not have the same amount of fuel. The quantity of fuel in the right wing was less than the left. Now, normally this problem is not so serious because it can be fixed during the flight itself. To fix this problem, the captain opened the crossfeed valve, due to which fuel started flowing from the left wing to the right wing, and in minutes the quantity of fuel in both the wings had become equal again. It had been just 10 minutes when the captain started getting a low fuel warning. This was a problem that no pilot wanted to face, especially in a plane full of passengers. The pilot saw that the fuel in the right wing had again reduced, and now both the wings together did not have enough fuel to reach Lisbon. This time the matter had become serious. Not many options to divert the plane in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. In reality, they had only one option, and that was to land over Ireland. These islands are a part of Portuguese territory situated in the Atlantic Ocean, where there is an airport on the island named Tarsara. The captain first contacted the Scenario ATC in his free time and told them that he was going to land at this airport due to fuel shortage. But even the pilot was not sure whether he would be able to reach this airport, and then he would have to land in the ocean itself. At this time, there was 7,000 kilograms of fuel in the plane, i.e., about 7,000 kilograms. This looks like a lot, but in the wing, there was only 6% of the A330 fuel capacity, and that too was getting reduced very fast. But the question is, why was the fuel getting reduced? Was a faulty sensor giving a wrong reading this time also? There was a shortage of fuel in the wing. Fuel getting reduced is possible only in one situation: that fuel is leaking from the wing. To find this out, the captain instructed the flight guru to check the front of the wing, i.e., behind the wing. Go and monitor it. If there is fuel leakage, then definitely some indication will be found from there. But due to darkness, the pilot could not get any such indication. Now the condition was that every 5 minutes, 1 liter of fuel was getting exhausted. It was clear to the captain that fuel was definitely getting leaked. They now had only 25 minutes of fuel left, which made it impossible to even reach the airport. During this time, the captain and the first officer were constantly in contact with the maintenance unit and ATC. The maintenance unit instructed the captain to take the plane from 39,000 to 20,000 feet to confirm the fuel leakage. But he refused because the pilot believed that even if the fuel leakage was confirmed, it would not be possible to climb the plane back up. At least at 39,000 feet, they still had the option of gliding. In the next few minutes, all doubts were cleared when the right engine of the plane flared out. Seeing this, the first officer got scared. There was panic, and the passengers who had been sleeping peacefully until now were shaken awake by the sudden fear in the air. Now the plane had only 4.3 tons of fuel left, and only one engine was running. It was not possible to cruise the aircraft on this one engine. So slowly, the remaining fuel started depleting. Meanwhile, emergency arrangements were being made at Tarsara Airport. Fire trucks and emergency crews began preparing to handle any possible situation. The aircraft, which was still 240 kilometers away from Tarsara Airport, now had only 600 kilograms of fuel left. And then what they feared actually happened. The left engine of the plane burned out due to operating at full thrust, and now Flight 236 was gliding over the Atlantic Ocean without any engine. At this point, the captain's earlier decision not to descend to 20,000 feet proved to be absolutely right. With both engines shut down, there was now darkness inside the aircraft, because the electrical system also runs on engine power. Fortunately, the plane's automatic emergency turbine deployed, which generates just enough electricity at high speed to run the essential equipment in the cockpit. Now Tarsara Airport was 120 kilometers away. The plane had descended to 30,000 feet, and the captain had to cover the remaining distance only by gliding. The darkness and complete silence in the passenger cabin created an atmosphere of intense fear, a kind of silence that perhaps indicated the possibility of disaster. The worst part was that if the plane could not reach the airport, it would have to crash land in the ocean. That is why the crew began preparing the passenger aircraft for a possible water landing. Landing in the ocean is extremely dangerous in every way. If a passenger falls backward due to the impact, they can drown, and even if they don't drown, they may die from hypothermia due to the cold water. Normally, flying a passenger aircraft without an engine is extremely difficult. Everything was now dependent on the pitch control of the plane, which the pilot was manually handling with a control stick. The altitude was dropping at 2,000 feet per minute, meaning the plane would reach the airport within the next 15 minutes. When the distance to the airport became 15 kilometers, the aircraft's altitude was still at 13,000 feet, but at such a distance, the altitude should normally be only around 3,000 feet. Now, if the pilot lowered the plane's nose to descend quickly, the aircraft's speed would increase, and in this situation, the chances of a crash landing would be very high. That is why the pilot made the aircraft perform a 360-degree turn at that point. Once the turn was completed, the distance from the airport remained the same, but the altitude had dropped to 5,000 feet. This altitude was still high, but not high enough to complete another 360. So, the pilot aligned the aircraft with the runway and performed a few S-turns. These S-turns increased the distance from the runway, allowing more time to reduce altitude safely. Under normal conditions, flaps are extended during landing to create drag, and engine thrust is used to lift the plane's nose. But Flight 236 had no engine thrust, so this landing was completely different from a regular one, and far more dangerous. The pilot had only one chance to land, either succeed or fail. Finally, the aircraft hit the runway with a massive jolt, and 8 out of the 12 tires burst. It was difficult to stop the plane, but eventually it began skidding. As soon as the aircraft came to a halt, the landing gear caught fire, but the airport crew immediately extinguished it. Flight 236 became the first and only passenger aircraft in aviation history to glide for the longest distance without an engine and still land safely. When an investigation was conducted regarding the fuel leak in the right engine, it was discovered that before takeoff in Toronto, a maintenance crew had replaced a part of the engine, but the part belonged to another aircraft model. The resulting leak caused vibrations in the engine, which nearly ruptured the fuel line of the right engine. Following this incident, Airbus introduced a new system designed to allow pilots to detect fuel leaks during future flights. A year later, Captain Robert Piché and First Officer Dirk de Jager were honored with the Superior Airmanship Award for successfully performing a dead-stick landing with the Airbus A330. We hope you will all like and share this video. Thank you very much for your kind comments. See you in the next amazing video.